Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch Podcast, brought to you by RosterWatch.com and by Underdog Fantasy, where you can use promo code ROSTER right now with your first sign up to get up to $100 of free money as far as a deposit bonus, a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. We're talking a lot about best ball today, and especially that tournament over at Underdog with our guest. You know him very well from the TaekCast, from the SportsGrid Fantasy Football Podcast. He's been on this podcast numerous times before. He's been on the SiriusXM radio show with us. He is Davis Mattek. You know him well from the Twitter. You know him well from the Twitterverse, where he's always getting into trouble at Davis Mattek, Matteek. Davis, what the hell's going on, brother?
Hey, man. You know we are just trying to stay safe and sane out here. You know, we got a bear market in the world. We got best ball summer. It's 100 degrees outside every day here, so I'm losing my mind outside. You know, we're just doing our best out here.
Dude, it's tough here too, man. We got this. Nobody likes weather talk, man, but we have this high pressure system sitting over Texas right now, where it's like, even if it wanted to rain, like rain couldn't come in, and it's like 106, 107 degrees every single day, dude. Just absolutely brutal. We'll get through it, though, man. We'll get through it. And like you said, hot, steamy best ball summer we have going on. Before I want to get to that, though, like I always love to have you on, too, because I got to get your thoughts on crypto. You're always on top of the world, whatever crypto is going big. Right now, things are bad. Last time I looked, Bitcoin – what is it today? Is it at 21K, something 21.5, something like that? I've even looked at my Ethereum. What are your general thoughts about the crypto market right now? And my question to you would be, if somebody were to ask you right now, if they were going to take some money and invest it into their no investment advice given,
no
Davis,
financial advice,
or by RosterWatch at all, but just as far as how you think about things going forward, like, would you want to put money into Bitcoin or put it into Ethereum right now? Because I'll just tell you my take. I know that there's lots of these random coins out there that are just such shitty, scammy coins, right?
Right.
But it does feel like there are some projects out there that are built on a Ethereum that I do think are really cool. Like we talked before about the basic attention stuff with the BAT, with the Brave browser, stuff like that. There are projects like that where I can see legitimate use cases for Ethereum, where it's like if something were to go bust with that, or if that ecosystem were to exist, none of these other cool attached things would exist. And so it makes me think that Ethereum could be a smart buy at these depressed prices. But I'd be interested to hear what you think. Like I know you're such a big Bitcoin fan. Clearly, I know very little about crypto, so I was just kind of interested to hear your take on it. It's as I'm sort of like an outside observer that just kind of dabbles.
Yeah, I mean, I can just give my skin in the game answer, which I think is good. When you ask someone a question about their money, I think there's definitely a difference between what they say people should do and what they are doing. So what I do is what I've been doing for years and years, which is I buy a small amount of Bitcoin every single week. I have my automated buys go through on Sunday afternoon, and I never sell. I just leave it. I sit it there. I move it over to a cold wallet, and it sits there, and it sits there, and it sits there, and it's going to keep sitting there for a long time. In terms of like timing the bottom, I mean, until the Fed does whatever they're going to do with the interest rates, like the markets are just going to keep being bloody in general. And I certainly do not envy the position of the Federal Reserve right now, trying to both combat inflation and a recession at the same time. Seems really difficult to me. And I think in the end, Bitcoin will win. That's kind of what I've always thought. Now, Ethereum, the interesting thing about Ethereum is that there's a lot of cool stuff you can build on it, a lot of applications. I think we're definitely coming to the tail end of building season. It's just a lot less interesting to build on a project that's trading at $900 and people are not wanting to buy it and people are not wanting to transact inside that ecosystem. But if and when we get another bull crypto market 2 years from now, 18 months from now, whenever, I think there will be a lot of interesting stuff built on Ethereum again. I don't hate Ethereum the way that a lot of people who really love Bitcoin do, but I definitely am of the opinion, like, there is no second best. There is no replacement for what Bitcoin is, in my opinion.
So, all right. So you love Bitcoin. You're always a Bitcoin maximalist. You're just gonna come on here and talk your bag. I completely get it. But just from the perspective of somebody who, from anybody that might want to get in, or anybody who says like, well, Jesus, I've seen these crashes before and they happen, and then there's always eventually a bull run. And why didn't I get in on this part of the cycle last time?
Right.
Like, if you're going to be buying and you want to buy on Coinbase, is somebody that just knows this stuff? Like, is Coinbase in these places, or like in Uphold Wallet, or any of these kind of, like, are these online marketplaces, are these places safe and secure as far as storing your crypto?
No. I would not leave my crypto on any exchange. I mean, even like we've seen exchanges get liquidated during this time frame. Like BlockFi is like out of money. Celsius is not letting you withdraw. It is definitely not safe. Now Coinbase and Kraken and Gemini probably are about as safe as it gets. Like, I would be super surprised if Coinbase ever had to like stop limiting withdrawals, right? But it's in the realm of possibility, right? Like like maybe it's 0.05% or whatever, but it's definitely possible. And I mean, we've already seen these places Coinbase is laying off a bunch of employees. They overextended themselves when the money was good, and they are getting, kind of margin wiped. So it's definitely not 100% safe.
Yeah, and so what you have to do is then you have to just do all this stuff where you memorize the keys and you send it to a new wallet and just all this stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. It's just it's like how hard is all that for somebody that's just starting?
It's not very hard. It's not very hard. It's not any more difficult than having a password manager or whatever. You just got to make sure you have everything like all written down and tracked somewhere. But it is harder than having like a Chase bank account, but not nearly as hard as people kind of make it seem. It's not that daunting.
Okay, so I have a couple more just overriding questions for Davis here. We know that Davis is such a deep thinker. Then I'm going to get into just the pure fantasy football stuff. Wanted to ask you, because I know at SportsGrid, I know with a lot of people. I mean, us at RosterWatch, certainly with the props and a bunch of the stuff on the Fantasy Sports channel, that's been kind of focusing a little bit more on the sports betting content. Kind of as a new vertical that people are looking at within their companies. That because in fantasy we have these tools that we use, which can be really helpful and good, for you would think for sports betting. But when I just look at sports betting, I just wonder, do you think the sports betting advice can ever be as actionable and as good as the fantasy advice that fantasy companies give? And my reason for asking is this: it's like, I feel like giving the sports betting advice is almost like giving it weekly is almost like giving like sit start advice. Like, do I start this guy? Do I start this guy? Which to me is always a lot harder to answer than just to help people with help you draft the best team, help you use the cheat sheet, make sure you got the best team, make sure you're in the good position to have good choices within that framework, to make sure you're managing your team correctly, make sure you're picking up the right guys on the waiver wire and stuff like that. I feel like with the sports betting content, it's like every single time you're having to answer the hardest question in fantasy, which is just the sit start, which is such a week to week variable thing. Right. I'd like to hear your take on it, and whether you think that the advice for sports betting can ever be as actionable and as good using these various tools as it is for fantasy.
It's kind of it's definitely a different style of advice, because the one style is the super intense. You give the line out in a Discord or a Slack channel or whatever, you at everyone and you say, we all got to go bet this right now at the exact same time because we're going to move the line or your account is going to get limited, right? And there are companies and groups of people that are having success with that. Our friends that Establish the Run do that at 4for4 BetSperts. They're doing things like that. Then there's kind of the data golf model, where they just have their numbers. They say Matthew Fitzpatrick is 27-1 to win this golf tournament. That's the good number. So if he's 28-1, you bet it. If he's 25-1, you don't bet it. I think that's probably the model. That's the model I use the most in terms of like content that I'm taking, where you tell me what the number is. Don't give me the how or the why. You just say, this is the number, and I have to trust that your math is good or that it's not good. And I have the ability, myself to do what I want with that information. And then the third type is sports infotainment, which is kind of what I do as a professional, which is you tune into my show and I'm like, yeah, I kind of lean like this is a good number. Like I kind of feel that this is good, or, this series price feels off to me because of X, Y, and Z, or George Pickens is a good offensive rookie of the year selection because it's not pricing in X, Y, or Z or whatever, which is actually what I think most people want, which is not super serious, super profit driven, but just a way to make kind of watching sports a little bit more enjoyable.
But you would think that sports infotainment stuff comes in more on the props than on the sides and the totals, right? More on the futures.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, because
cool.
I think we're now at a point in sports betting where most people are, maybe not most people, but people who are pretty plugged in realize that the numbers to beat are like pretty difficult, right? Like most people know betting sides and totals is just a hard, like no one's really doing that to make a living, right? And I think most people realize that by now.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of these dudes will claim that they make a living at it all the time. So and for me, it's always the age old thing. It's like, well, I mean, if you're making a living doing it, why are you asking me to pay you for your picks? Like, why not just go make a living doing this, right?
Right.
So, so just one of the things that I've kind of wondered about. I know that you're a content creator in this space. It's something I've just been kicking around in my head about, the best way to handle the sports betting content. And I kind of like it from your standpoint of, a lot of it is just kind of it's like the information along with the entertainment can help people, you kind of lead a horse to water, but trying to put yourself out here like one of these douchebags with the 5-star epic locks or whatever like that.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk fantasy. I've been doing some redraft simulations using the early ADPs from ESPN and Yahoo, CBS Sports, RT Sports, Fantasy Football Calculator, Sleeper, some like not Underdog, right?
Right.
And dude, and the ADPs are just it's so much different. People are drafting so much differently. Have you noticed this at all? Have you started doing any early kind of redraft sims? And if so, my main question is, are you going to be taking any of the stuff from the Underdog drafts and taking that with you into redraft season? Because it's like, for me, just for an example of something that sticks out. You can get Jamar Chase at Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson at redraft picks at like pick 10, something like that. And that just would never happen in Underdog. What are you thinking as far as that dichotomy? And is there anything that you'll take from the Underdog streets to be able to help you in redraft?
Well, there are a couple big differences. I mean, the first one being quarterbacks are going to be pushed up. Quarterbacks and tight ends are going to be pushed up in best ball because you need 2 of them, sometimes even 3 of them. So that has a pretty big impact on ADP. Like that's one of the big changes for me, when we start drafting the FFPC main event and stuff, is that the elite tier of quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Mahomes, Herbert, Lamar, they'll be pretty consistent. But the second tier of guys, your Derek Carrs, your Kirk Cousins, those guys are going to go much later. In terms of like, the ESPN leagues and the Yahoo leagues, it's like that's just a different game than the game that I play. You know what I mean? Because I really only have one self-contained home league that's done with players who are like, they're just dudes. They're just my buddies from high school and college or whatever. Now, I recognize that a lot of people that listen to this show, that listen to my show, they are playing in those types of leagues. And I do my best, to like Matthew Berry always does a great way of explaining this, which, people complain about the ESPN Fantasy Focus show or whatever. And he's like, guys, I'm not, the show is not really made for super serious grinding $5,000, $10,000 worth of leagues guy. It's made for the guy who wants a 30-minute catch up on what's going on in fantasy football so he doesn't suck in his fantasy league. And I think that's really important to make content for that guy. So I just think you need to address both of those things. When you're talking about waiver wire stuff, like don't assume that the third running back on the Kansas City Chiefs is owned in, every 12-team league or whatever.
Yeah, and then I would just also say, with the whole thing, it's like, people say stuff like, we just get to this time of year where people are just dying for takes, and people say like, well, late round quarterback's dead. And to me, like as I'm doing these simulations, it's like, on Underdog late round quarterbacks dead because, like you said, everybody needs 2 or 3 of them. But dude, like guys like Derek Carr, I mean, they're these players who are falling to the 13th round of these drafts that like the super sharp underdog guys would never ever let happen. Dude, Derek Carr always falls. Kirk Cousins always falls, like, to the very end of these drafts. So it's just a couple of things that I've really noticed. Also, just as far as the running backs, people are just in redraft. People are back to just gobbling up running backs. There's none of this stuff with the early wide receivers. It just didn't have. It's really interesting to have to go back from one to the other when you're making a cheat sheet with these and figure out the way that these drafts are going to fall and where you can find value. Do you find value right now in Josh Jacobs with all the hate that he's been getting? Because there's been the report from Vic Tafer that they're going to have a committee approach. They didn't pick up the new admin, or I guess the new regime didn't pick up the fifth year option for Josh Jacobs. It felt like the writing might be on the wall that backfield could be getting sort of Patriots-ized. But now we're seeing his ADP just fall so greatly, and it's a dude who actually, as far as games he's busted for you over the past 2 years, he's one of the best in the league as far as getting you at least 10 points in PPR. What do you think about Josh Jacobs?
Yeah, not interested at all in redraft leagues, in the FFPC, in your ESPN leagues, your Yahoo leagues, or whatever. I mean, he is. Kenyon Drake is there. They signed Brandon Bolden. They draft Samir White. They're also probably, I would imagine, with the addition of Devontae Adams, going to be less interested in throwing to the running backs for even for an offense that has not thrown to the running backs all that often. They have arguably 3 guys who are all going to demand. I would assume Renfrow, Waller, and Adams are going to combine for 65%, maybe even greater than that, of the team's total targets. So you got a small pie. You have a guy who hasn't really played on third downs much in his career. He had the 6 receptions in the opening game against Carolina this last year, and we thought, maybe it's going to happen. So that type of guy is really not very valuable, in seasonal managed leagues. But actually, that guy is valuable in best ball leagues because of how he fits with roster construction. Where, I mean, to get to advance, I mean, you might just need a guy who's going to grind out 13.5, 14 points a week. And I feel pretty confident Jacobs should be in that range. I think he has no league winning upside unless he runs into 20 touchdowns somehow, which I guess he could do if the Raiders are just really good. I mean, like if the Raiders are super wheels up, top 5 scoring team in the NFL with the addition of Adams, maybe. But I don't feel I feel like that's a very slim part of the range of outcomes.
Josh Jacobs, if you just look at it, he's busted for you in at least in PPR. He's busted for you only 12.9%. So gotten you less than 10 points only 12.9% of the time. Yeah. Compared to like guys like Aaron Jones, even Mixon, all these guys are all 20% guys. I mean, Najee Harris and Derrick Henry would bust like 25% of the time. So Josh Jacobs has actually been pretty steady. He doesn't have those big monster games, but he rarely busts for you. So I do like that as far as, because he is one of these guys that's going in that sort of running back dead zone. Like, is he one of the guys you like most in that dead zone? Is there a dead zone running back that you actually like right now? One of those kind of rounds, say 3 through 7 types of runners as far as underdog ADP?
I mean, I definitely do like Travis Etienne. So right now, Travis Etienne is going as the running back 17, just ahead of Cam Akers, Breece Hall, and David Montgomery. I mean, he to me has. It's pretty thin, but if the Jaguars do the combination of improve and use Etienne strictly as not strictly, but just as I think he could get 80 targets this season.
Dude, yes.
And Breece Hall. I mean, Breece Hall.
Do you remember what a good receiver he was?
So good. Yeah, he was so good, and he was so good with this quarterback. And we've seen, obviously in this Doug Peterson offense, we've seen massive running back seasons. And James Robinson still has not returned to minicamp, still not running. So that's pretty positive for him. And then I can't believe I've landed here, but it's got to be Breece Hall and David Montgomery. Breece Hall, if the Jets are good, which I think there is a chance of that happening. And then Montgomery just has no competition for touches at all. And the Bears are probably going to be bad. But if they're bad and he gets 22 touches a game, I mean, Like I would probably take David Montgomery ahead of Ezekiel Elliott, who is going like 20 picks ahead of him.
Man. David Montgomery, if you just look at his, I know I still have the same tool pulled up because I wanted to look at the Jonathan Taylor bust stuff. But if you look at the scoring, or I'm not the Jonathan Taylor, who the bust stuff with, who was I mentioning with the low bust rate earlier? It was Josh Jacobs.
Yeah.
But whenever on this same tool, if you just look at the amount of monster games, David Montgomery has had basically the same percentage of monster games over the course of the last 2 years as Jonathan Taylor. Both of them get you over 20 points in standard or over 25 points in PPR 25% of the time. It's like David Montgomery has a good scoring profile, and there's nothing that's really changed this year as far as any competition, unless you count in a step up from Khalil Herbert, which I guess is something that we probably should maybe think about. Has the dead zone, has the whole thing, people were completely avoiding these guys before. This year, it doesn't seem like people are avoiding them as much. As the whole dead zone narrative jumped the shark finally, you think? Is that kind of where we are with it?
No, I mean, it's still pretty real. I think the difference is that the market 4 years ago still would have been drafting Ezekiel Elliott in the second round, still would have been drafting David Montgomery in the second, third round, would have been drafting Josh Jacobs pretty high. And the market has kind of switched on that front, where we're drafting guys like Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Allen Robinson, DK Metcalf, Gabriel Davis, just a lot higher. Gabriel Davis, had he had the season he had last year, 5 years ago, he still would not have been, a top 60 pick in redraft leagues, but I mean, he definitely deserves it. So it's just, I think, like a lot of things in the world, the markets just get better over time as they get more information, and the information out there for fantasy football is so good right now.
Gabriel Davis, speaking of information coming out, the news I was reading on Roto World this morning, the reports coming out that he's looking like the best running mate that Stephon Diggs has had yet in Buffalo. It's looking like things are really looking up for him. He's a guy who's sort of a mover right now up, but it feels like Treylon has been a mover down. The report coming out today, it looks like he's behind Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. What do you think? Are you buying are you buying all the Treylon hate? What do you think? I mean, is he a 1-for-1 replacement for AJ Brown? How do you see this thing playing out with Treylon in Tennessee? He's definitely kind of a divisive figure.
I mean, I definitely don't buy the hate. I really liked Burks coming out of Arkansas. I think he's a really good player. I was definitely surprised. I would have paid AJ Brown that money if I was the decision maker for the Tennessee Titans. Like no doubt about that for me. I think AJ Brown is phenomenal, like a guy you can build around. But I think the Titans are just going to have to be more pass heavy than they've been in years past. Their offensive line is not very good. Their defense is bad. Their division should be more competitive this year, with the Jaguars improving, the Colts getting a better quarterback, and even the Texans are not. They're definitely not as bad as the market anticipated they were going to be last year, playing in more competitive games than the market anticipated. Like Davis Mills is just a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And Derrick Henry is now 29. Coming off of this foot injury. He looked horrible in their playoff game. I would be pretty surprised to see Derrick Henry hold up to, 350 carries, 25 carries a game type stuff. And Burks seems like the best slot wide receiver on their roster. Those are easier throws to make, easier plays to call. So if there is a dip on Treylon Burks, I will definitely be buying it.
Oh, there's going to be a dip after this news that he's running behind Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. People are going to get a little bit goosey about taking him for sure. He's certainly going to be moving down below. Like here's three guys that we were having a hard time with. We were on our text chain yesterday with my two other, with Trashman and Byron, our two other co-founders here at RosterWatch, and talking about these guys. And we all three had different answers about where to rank these players who are going a little bit before Treylon Burks and a little bit before Drake London and some of the other rookies. But I would like to hear how you rank these three for half-point PPR underdog stuff.
Yeah.
Brandon Cooks, Cortland Sutton, Marquise Brown. Again, between us three guys that use the same tools and think about things the same way, we all three had different answers and reasons why. It feels to me like it's a pretty close little cluster. What do you think between those three guys, Cooks, Sutton, and Hollywood?
I mean, I'm gonna go.
I see the OU behind.
I'm just gonna go the boring answer. I have them the way ADP goes, I would have. Well, actually, Sutton might go ahead of Hollywood, but I have Hollywood, Sutton, and then Brandon Cooks. So one, Kyler, before he gets hurt every year, and like about week 8, week 9 is the first time he's going to get hurt. The guy is like unbelievable. I mean, he is pinpoint accurate, maybe the best deep ball thrower in the NFL. They have tried to add tools for him, right? Andy Isabella didn't work. Rondale Moore didn't really work. He only ran like 290 routes.
Incomplete.
I love Rondale. They just haven't figured it out yet, right? He had the lowest ADOT in the NFL, like 4 yards lower than Cole Beasley. Hopkins absolutely tore it up for the first, I think, 11 games of his Cardinals career. Then he got hurt and looked bad last year before I think he ended up missing 9 games with that hamstring injury. They add AJ Green, who whatever. They add Zach Ertz again, whatever. It's Zach Ertz and AJ Green. What do you want them to do? But Kyler to me is incredible. And we've seen glimpses of it. It's been stops and starts. I don't think Cliff is a very good coach. That definitely plays into all of this. I mean, they just run a very close to the line of scrimmage offense. But Hollywood, on a per target basis, he just never got targeted that much. The Ravens never threw more than 400 times in a season when he was on the field, right? So that's a big problem in terms of volume. But I think if you're looking at guys here, Brown, Sutton, Cooks, who can realistically go in the second round next year, I mean, it's totally Hollywood, right? Because Hopkins is suspended, incomplete grade on Rondale, AJ Green, Andy Isabella, Antoine Wesley, Zach Ertz, Trey McBride, just a lot of guys who are not going to command a high target share, even if things go well for them. So that's how I see it.
Do you think Marquise Brown's a better player than Rashad Bateman? I know that they're different kinds of players.
So I think that Bateman is the better. You can ask him to do anything, and he can do it. He could be a slot wide receiver. He could be a boundary wide receiver. He could be the flanker. He could run 9 routes. He can beat press coverage. He can catch contested passes. But so this is a weird way to explain this. But the one thing Hollywood can do, which is create separation down the field against any player, he might be the best at that of anyone who's let's say 25 or younger. He might be better than Jamar Chase at getting away from a safety 30 yards down the field. I mean, he's so good at that. So I think Bateman is the better all around. Ask him to do anything and he can plug the hole. But the one thing that Hollywood can do is the most non-replaceable skill set amongst wide receivers.
I like that. That's a good nuanced answer. He is, of course, Davis Mattek. You can find him on Twitter at Davis Mattek. You can hear the TaekCast. That's spelled TAEK cast. And then also the SportsGrid Fantasy Football Podcast, where you can hear all of his content over there. But just make sure to follow him on Twitter. He'll make sure and tweet out everything he's doing, even some shit you probably don't even want to hear from him about.
Sure.
You're definitely gonna get it. All right, Davis, 2 more questions before I get you out of here, brother. These are the toughest ones. The single player you are positive is going too late in early best ball and redraft leagues. So this is a player who you're absolutely sure is going to be a steal.
Rhamondre Stevenson for the Patriots.
You're sure.
Start 100%. Starting to sound like James White is going to start the season on the PUP list. So the options for passing down back in New England are Pierre Strong, who is a 4th-round rookie pick, Rhamondre Stevenson, Kevin Harris, who is a 6th-round pick, or for Damien Harris has never – I can't remember the exact stat. It's either that he's never had more than 3 targets in a game or he's only had 3 or more targets in a game once. I'd have to go look it up too. But basically they're not
something like that.
They're not throwing the ball to Damien Harris. Yeah, they're not doing it. And Rhamondre did play in that role last year. I guess they could also have JJ Taylor do it. But basically, I think Rhamondre is the best runner on the roster anyway. And he seems to have the best skill set of playing on 3rd downs of the guys that they have available until James White gets back. And the Patriots offense should be decent because they have a lot of decent players, not great players. And Belichick's a good coach and Mac Jones is fine at executing the offense. And Rhamondre seems to be the best of those guys. It just feels like it's all lining up for him to get 195 carries, 850 rushing yards. But if he wins the goal line work over Damien Harris, I mean, he could just we know when a Patriots backfield really wins their role. go down the line, right? I mean, you could name 20 guys: Rex Burkhead, Shane Vereen, Corey Dillon, Stephen Ridley. Like, it literally doesn't matter.
Green Ellis, like everything.
And it doesn't even matter what the role it is. But when the guy wins his part of the backfield and doesn't split it with anyone, they just crush. And I think Rhamondre can do it. And I know he went to Oklahoma, so might be a little bit of a biased answer there. But he's the guy who I'm just like, this guy's going at running back 39, and like he could just be such a smash.
Okay, so I guarantee you this won't be an Oklahoma player. You answer for this one. The final question for Davis Mattek here at Davis Mattek on Twitter. The single player you're positive is going too early in early best ball and redraft leagues. This is the player who you're most sure of, any player in all the sport, that is surely going to bust.
So I got two answers here. I'm trying to decide which one to go with. I'm going to go with the more controversial one because it's good. Okay. It's good. It's good radio. I don't see any way that Keenan Allen and Mike Williams both pay off going at wide receiver 12 and at wide receiver 13. And it could be there's just not enough ball to go around for those guys. I don't think. I mean, Herbert would have to throw a lot of touchdowns, like 50 touchdowns or something, for them both to get there. I mean, going ahead of Pittman, Hollywood, Waddle, DJ Moore, the Denver guys, like it's just insane to me. And now, if Mike Williams, if his role changes from last season and the seasons before, if they just let him run a more complete route tree, then I think he smashes Keenan Allen. I think he goes absolutely ballistic, and I think Keenan is the one who busts. But if Mike Williams, if his route tree doesn't change, then I think Keenan is fine. Basically, gets his 90 catches, 1,000 yards, and 8 touchdowns or whatever. But I will say, I think it's very, very slim that those two guys going at the tail end of the second round, beginning of the third round, I don't think they'll both